Thank you for joining us for another episode of Talking Security with Caliber. Today, we have Mike Libero as a guest with us. I have Jackson here with me. Jackson's is president of Caliber Security Partners. I'm Tab Pierce. I'm the CEO of Caliber Security Partners. And pretty much all the time when we have guests on, we're not going to say who they work for because that matters less to us than who they are and what they have to talk about. So we're not going to talk about that unless they want to talk about that. But Mike, welcome. I think everybody would like to know who you are before we jump in and just start talking.
Sure. My name's Mike Libero, like you said, and I've been working in software security, application security since about 2005, and have ran the gamut from bug hunter to running teams to back to bug hunter to being a dev to running teams some more. So that's pretty much all there is to know about me. So.
Yeah, and Mike, you and I go way back. It's been years, and we've kind of kept that friendship alive. And it's just like anything; it just kind of, we stay active in the community in that. But you and I have had some interesting conversations, and we were talking earlier today, just kind of as a brief about all the areas of application security and what might be interesting. And one of the things that you had said that is kind of, I don't want to say near and dear to my heart, but like pain and anguish for me. And that is how people work together inside of security groups, application security, devs, all of that. And this is really interesting to me. We're doing a podcast with somebody who we're going to talk about security design review, and the whole premise of it is securing all the parts. And as soon, and I'll cover this when it's released when I speak to him, but as soon as he said securing all the parts, what I heard is hurting all the cats, right? And so what's your experience with trying to pull everybody together and, some of the difficulties?
Yeah. We all have, different competing priorities. I mean, that's just life, right? But at the same time, everybody wants to do what's right for the company, or at least most people do, or else they wouldn't be working for said company. And that usually includes security, right? Like, I mean, most people want our stuff to be secure, and they don't want to have like data breaches or anything like that. And so, but oftentimes it seems like the security team just kind of won't take into account the other team's priorities. I work with a lot of development teams and also DevOps teams, right? And, they have a very tough job. They have to, keep cutting features and keeping the infrastructure alive and everything else. And so, if we don't approach them with, kind of a heads up and say, hey, this is what we want to achieve. Where does this fit in your queue? And just kind of demand that they do it. It doesn't often, land well. I don't think anybody likes to just have somebody marching in, coming in, and demanding that they get something done. So.
Yeah, and you talking about the queue. That's something I think people are often forget is that it may be a high priority for you, and it might not be for us, right? And I remember sitting in front of. Do you remember Kirk Bailey years ago? Was at University of Washington. He was the CISO there, and I'm having a discussion. I can say this because it was like 18 years ago, and I was selling AppSec, and he goes, and I'm like, I'm not getting through to him, and he finally stopped me and goes, wait a second, I know AppSec is number one priority for you, but I don't know, it's like 15 or 18 for me at the time, and it just kind of hit me like, oh. What's a priority of mine isn't a priority for them. And you think about like the communication that we have at Caliber.
Yeah.
And, it's like everybody, like for a long time, I would say, we have a communication issue. We have a communication issue. And everybody was like, I don't think we have a communication issue. I'm like, we definitely do. And it wasn't until we like broke that down and talked about how we need to like communicate that we started realizing like I wasn't getting what I needed, but everybody else was getting what they needed.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to think about, what goes on in your world. And, I didn't have the same feeling as you did when it came to communication, because I was able to sort of just work alone and get my stuff done and not have to really, work with others in order for me to get, my task completed. But on your, things that you're working on, you need everybody's help.
Yeah. And Mike, I think that communication goes beyond AppSec, right? But when if I'm an AppSec guy at whatever company it is, and I bring something to the team and I'm like, hey, look at all this that we have, and they're all high priority or they're all medium or whatever it is, my expectation might be fix it. And their expectation may be different. I mean, right?
Yeah, totally. Because, they have a bigger, well, I won't say they have a bigger, but they have a different viewpoint than you, right? Like they see all the other things. Like we got to go upgrade this system component. The CEO is demanding that we write this feature next week and ship it, all the, a myriad of things, right? So I always like to try and come in and kind of, don't demand, like make it firm that I want them to get it fixed, but also work with them on like the time and like when they can do it, right? And what's reasonable. Because like,
and what, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say like, when there's a really bad issue, I've never had any problems with anybody getting something fixed. Like, we have a remote code execution on the internet, and here's, this one web request that will make it work. Yeah, that's going to get fixed real quick. Like nobody's going, like argue with us. But when you come in and be like, it's missing this OS patch and it's critical, people are going to be like, is it really though? Like, I'm kind of confused at that, and
yeah.
So,
and so you really have to. I mean, I think if certain things, everybody's going to look at it and they're going to say, yeah, that's an issue, just like you said. Some of them, it may be as big of an issue as the ones that everybody agrees is an issue. But if you can't articulate why that needs to be taken care of right now, you're not going to get the buy-in to do it right now. Because if they don't see it, all they may hear is like, yeah, you say that's important, but you also gave me a list of about I don't know, 100, 1,000 or whatever is out there, So it becomes a prioritizing thing, and I really think a communication thing, right?
Yeah, and also besides communication, also a relationship thing, right? Like, I mean, if you just show up randomly knocking on their door, demanding them to do something, it's not going to land as well as if you've already done the work to kind of introduce yourself before, when you didn't have anything to ask them to do, and I'm not trying to go out and have a beer with these people, but I wanted them to know like who I am, how I can help them, and also, when I might come knocking, what it might be, so that they understand that like I'm fairly reasonable, and if I say something's bad, it probably is bad, and we probably need to get it fixed. But
yeah, So the relationship part of it's huge, right? I mean, it really is, because you've got to have, you don't have to like an unreasonable level of respect, but you have to have a level of respect where they don't think you're crying wolf every single time. But especially, I mean, you're remote from the rest of your company, right? I mean, is most everybody remote? And so how do you build relationships when you're in a completely different state? And that's so common now. How do you recommend doing that?
I mean, I don't think there's one rule, right? But like, I will often try and mediate if other people are having problems, so that they know, like, we can help them kind of be the cool heads in the room. You know, if I see an article or something that I think them or their team could find useful, I let them know. If I hear something that's useful going on at the company that they might, want to know about that, also pass that along, right? Just kind of understanding where their problems might be, and then, or what they might, find useful and helpful, and just trying to be helpful to them. It doesn't have to be a huge, item, but just, if you show that you're thinking about people and you want them to succeed, they're going to have a better, positive, outlook on you. And I'm not trying to do it in a conniving way, right? Like, I want them to succeed anyways. Like I don't like, we're all on the same team. Let's, all do well and do good. And the only way we can do that is by like helping each other. And so, like, it's not like I'm trying to do this in a self-serving way, but I do understand that it is also going to help me too. And, even if it doesn't, then whatever, like, I'm still helping them. So.
Yeah. And it could seem self-serving. I could see how someone might, see that could be a way just to, help further your own agenda. But like you said, you are on the same team. And so, but you kind of have to go out of your way to do that. So there is some trust there when it comes time, for you to be able to be, trusted, like, hey, this is serious. Let's do this. For them to be like, oh, he says it's serious, then it must be serious. So, I could totally see why that's important.
One of the things that I always think about is how, like, that the definition of insanity is doing the same things over and over again, expecting a different result. And I know that inside of a company, these things just cycle. They happen over and over again. So it's like, okay, I said this is a problem. You said it's not. We came to a conclusion, and now I got another one that I say it is. You say it isn't. We're going to come to it. And it's like this perpetual, like, dog chasing its tail. I mean, is there any way to get it? I mean, there's got to be a way. We're smart people, but what do you recommend, if anything?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to obviously depend on the company culture, right? But I do think, like, a lot of security practitioners don't come from a development or as technical of a background, right? Like, they're all smart people, and I'm not knocking on them on any way, but like, oftentimes I've seen it where they just they kind of default to like the manual process instead of like taking a step back and just being like, hey, is there something that we can do or put in place that just solves this problem for the most part, right? And like, whatever you want to call it, shift left, enabling developers, paved road, like, it's been around like since the beginning, right? It's always been there. And like, and there's been companies that have done it really well, but like most companies haven't, right? And many times, like, we just don't take a step back and go, how can we solve this problem? And it doesn't have to be like write our own custom software or anything like that, right? But it's like, okay, well, we need a patch, in a realistic timeline. Great. Is there also some other controls we can put in place so that we can work with the IT teams to, not have fire drills every patch Tuesday, or, every third one when there's a critical. You know what I mean? Like, let's add some mitigating factors in there so that we can kind of be a little bit sane, except for the black swan events.
Yeah, and I think that part when you say be a little bit sane is a key point. It's so easy to, we're all, prone to like bouts of paranoia or whatever you want to call it, right? Where you look at it and you're like, you know what? I have these items that I say are a high. They're probably not going to think it's a high, which means that this is going to go in this direction and they're not going to like it. And so you start to build up this whole process in your head of like, what's going to happen? I'm going to do this. They're going to say that. This is going to do it. And so you send out a message and they don't respond right away. And then it just kind of festers like, oh, you know what I mean? Then pretty soon you're like, oh, that frickin' ass, man. That dude he's doing this intentionally. He's ghosting me, man. And they're not, but you just spin that up. And I think so much of it has to do with, in a moment of like calmness, creating a process of what you have to do, and then ideally following that process along. In my mind, that gives me that allows me to be more logical. I become more logical because then I can sit there and say, okay, if I have to do this thing, then I need to do, then this is how I'm going to go about doing it. And I think sometimes, like on things like this, we just kind of forego any sort of process, and we just kind of like go with our reactive state.
Yeah, totally. I mean, whatever you want to call it, process, checklist, run book, like having something that's well defined and understood, it's super useful, right? Because, like we don't have fire drills every day, and the people that do or have something that's like way more worrisome, like pilots and surgeons and people on the front lines, like they have these things, right? And like it's been proven time and time again that they, like in an emergency, they use those things very effectively. And it's like, yes, the stakes aren't always as high for us, but we can take those learnings and like use them in our corporate environments.
And that to me is when you start thinking about like the human aspect of all of this, right? I mean, that's the part we're really talking about is like how do we get people out of either the need to control or the need to call everything a fire drill or whatever. And that for me personally, inside, as a leader of a company, and I imagine you as a security leader, that managing the human aspect of it and like how you get that is, I find the most frustrating part of it, because I don't know what I'm battling sometimes inside of somebody. Like if they got something going on at home, or they were just raised to like retreat, or I don't know. So I mean, I imagine you go through those things too. So that to me is like, we can talk about this all day long, and it's like, okay, what's the solve?
Yeah. Well, I mean, like humans are squishy and they're hard, and like
both.
It's just it's a tough problem, and to your point, like I try and have a degree of empathy, and I try and understand what the people are going through, and figuring out what also drives them and what their priorities are, right? Because like everybody has a different set of priorities, and from one day to the next, people might have other stuff going on, be that a kid being sick, they got pulled over, the boss just yelled at them, who knows, right? And so you gotta not take so many things personally, right? Like somebody might be having a bad day and they take it out on you. Does it suck? Yeah. But like, if the situations were flipped around, would you do something similar? Maybe. So like, can't really be too judgmental, so it's,
Caliber's always been a heavy remote company. Our people have always been remote, even though we have an office, people work from home, they do whatever. But But COVID, like for everybody else, COVID made it more remote and more reclusive in that. And for years, we used to do something called sci-fi. So every Friday, we'd invite people into the office, we'd order pizza, and we'd watch a science fiction movie, right? Every Friday we did this. And it was really cool. And then the pandemic happened, and we were like, okay, we'll stop doing that like everything else. And we started doing sci-fi over a teleparty, and it's not as cool, right? And we tell everybody, you get lunch on Caliber, you have a whatever it is, a bento card and you do that. And then we basically, it turns into Mystery Science 38 or 3000, where everybody starts to just go back and forth and make fun. And the only reason I bring that up is what I find is when we get into anything that's social, and we can kind of remove this is a business technical kind of relationship. Anytime we can take that away and we make it social or just fun or relaxed, people will say, "Oh, the reason why you say, can I tell you a story?" And this is a sales trick now. Can I tell you a story? Oh, because now Mike can relax because he doesn't have to perform. Okay, whatever. But with this, when we get it into into that sci-fi, people start to like hang out and talk and that. And I think sometimes if you can socialize together, break bread, whatever you want to call it, even though it's remote, then when you have to go to somebody and you're like, hey, I know you don't think this is a priority, but this is a priority, and let me explain to you why. I think maybe the more we can allow that relationship to foster and build, the more we're more inclined to be relaxed and empathetic for other people. Because I think that's the challenge: is how do you get that tighter relationship, so you kind of like whatever like earn tokens or have tokens, so I can come to you and say, hey Mike, this is something serious, I need you to listen to me, and I need you to either prove to me that this isn't a high, or I need to prove to you that it is a high, and then then maybe you're more likely to go, yeah, okay, I'll listen to what Tab has to say.
Yeah. I mean, people want to remember that, or people want you to know that they're human, right? And we've ran across people that are, playing the game, and we know that they're, out for them. Like, it's obviously visible, and we tend to not want to help those people. I mean, we will if we have to, right? And we don't want to roadblock them, but, them or somebody who's actually genuinely nice and wants to help the company, who are you going to help first? Probably going to help the genuine person.
And that's a good point. I mean, we know those people, and either those people, I'm going to make an assumption. Those people will either intentionally or unintentionally make themselves difficult, and people will look and say, how do I do a workaround this individual? How do I just bypass them and go find a solution? But that doesn't really help anything, right? So, I don't know that that's anything more than just pontificating and just yapping, but that's just something I recognize internally is like if somebody's not pliable or whatever, that I'm like, I'll find a workaround.
Yeah. Yeah. So. Also to your point about the remote work and everything, even before the pandemic, many, many years before, right? Sure, we all had to go into offices, but you get to a certain company size or just depending on the business, right? They're going to be spread out geographically. It might be, the building across the street, or it might be the building across the country, but you're still spread out. And, those same tactics apply. The remote work has always been there. It's just people didn't call it, even if they're in the office, right? We know tons of companies that, have buildings in all over, offices in all over, the US or the world. And, we've been having to do that for, a long time now. And people might frame it as being different, but it's really not different. Like, you still use the same tools.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you if you think about it, I mean, if you're on the other side of a wall and we're communicating like this, what difference is it if it's on the other side of a wall or other side of the country?
Yeah.
Other than physically being able to,
There's still barriers
walk
to
over.
communication because no matter what, you're never going to have everybody in the same room. And if you did, then that would be chaos, like especially large organizations. So you're right. It's the same. It's just different. So
Yeah. I'm saying.
I don't know that we're gonna solve the communication or the relationship or any of this problem here. I do think that we need to keep talking about it inside of companies and outside. In my opinion, this is like one of the biggest challenges out there. Is it doesn't do any good to do a test to come back with findings and then everybody, or not everybody, but a large group of people automatically put up a barrier one way or the other, either as the giver or the receiver of the findings.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
I mean,
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, besides just doing like a test, right? Like, there's numerous stories almost everybody has of, a security tool being rolled out or a non-security tool being rolled out, just a tool being rolled out in your corporate world, or, a bunch of bugs or tickets or whatever you want to call it landing on your plate, right? And you wake up the next morning and stuff isn't working, or you all of a sudden have like an avalanche at work, and people understandably are frustrated, right? But that goes back to the communication thing. Like, just give us the heads up that it's coming and what to expect. And like, cool, thanks. Now know where this came from, and we were ready for it. And that's going to go a long ways, because people are like, oh, you were thoughtful enough to just like let us know that it was coming. Like,
yeah.
And that's part of communication.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Have you ever read Gene Kim's book, The Phoenix Project?
It's been a long time ago.
It's been years. Yeah, exactly. It's been years and years and years since I read it. The one thing that I took, that I remember, I probably took a lot out of it, but that I remember from it was just like the firestorm that they were dealing with, and how many like other competing priorities there were going on, and that people were irritated that their needs weren't being met, when in the grand scheme of things their needs like paled to all of these other this like big massive hairball, and I think that like trying to put ourselves in somebody else's position and saying they may not be getting at this quickly because they've got some things that are actually more important than this.
Yeah,
and that's hard to do when you're trying to check a box that somebody did something. You're like, just all I want you to do is I can check my damn box. It's not like that, but that's how it feels, right?
Well, especially if that's your job. Like, my job is to bring these things up, and my job is to take this seriously.
And my job is to see that remediation happens.
Yeah.
And you're not doing it.
For sure.
Yeah. And then, and everybody's
I'm just going to say, I get it, right? Because if remediation doesn't happen, then your boss starts breathing down your neck, or the CEO or the CTO, right? And it's you don't want to point fingers, but and that's why partnership matters.
Yeah. So I don't want to take too much more time, but you brought up something that if we could just touch on it just briefly, and that's the remediation side of it. We've had this discussion, you and I, about kind of tools and the help. Is there anything that a tool could do that it's not doing right now that would help maybe alleviate some of that communication or relationships or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, some of the gaps I've seen in a lot of the security tools, right, is, I mean, they're not earth-shattering ideas, right? But I don't know about anybody else, but I've never walked into a company where I've been in, the first year of founding, right? Especially for AppSec, it's always 5-10 years in, you got a huge pile of debt, but you also don't want to like just dump 10,000 findings over to the devs, right? So you got to triage them, which means, do we have a good triaging flow, right? Like, can I say, this issue's been looked at or not? And most of the time, they don't even have that in their, tool. Like, you got to go export it to a G sheet and then start doing it manually. And like, yeah, it's a pain.
And like, that's going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, that's, unless you want to piss off, your partner teams. And then same with like, groupings, right? Like, say, whatever, third-party vulnerabilities or secrets in code, right? They cluster, right? So like, you might have the same AWS key show up like 10 times in your repo. Does that mean you cut 10 bugs for that same key? No. You want to cut just one bug with like, here's where the source is at of these keys, like rotate it, get it done, like be done. But like, no tool allows you to like group it and send it over, right? They're all like, yeah, you can export to Jira or, whatever bug tool you want. You do it and it then, just either cuts a bunch of bugs or, I'll be like, here's the issue, link back to the product. And it's like, neither of those are helpful. Like, and, there's other things too, right? Like, it's really hard to write customized, remediation steps that are tailored to the company in tools, but that's like understandable, right? But I can't export stuff and be like, these things are associated with, together, right? Same with like third-party packages, right? Like, I don't want to cut 50 bugs because, there's 50 vulnerable packages in your Node app, right? I want to cut one bug and link it to your NPM, file and just be done with it, right? Because at the end of the day, what are the devs going to do? They're going to assign that to one person to fix. They're not going to assign it to 50 other people to fix that one issue. And so like, well, they don't do those simple things. Like, I think it's just, they don't think about like, oh, what are the key user stories that happen, right? So, and nothing against them. I get it's tough and everybody's going to have a slightly different workflow, but yeah, like, I don't know, it just seems reasonable, I guess.
Yeah. And I think about that, and I think having something like that actually, going back to that, having a good workflow, having a good process, whatever, that a tool could really help alleviate some of those relationships and communication things. Because if you've got to do that and you're like, I have to manually do that, there's a high probability that somebody somewhere is going to go, screw that, I'm not doing that. That's a lot of work. Yeah. Those guys aren't going to use it anyway. And so you just kick it over the fence, and then those guys receive it, and they're like, screw that. That dude just kicked it over the fence. So I do think that there's opportunities for tools to help out with that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, quite often, we just have to write customized scripts to do it for us. So like, that's a tool right there. So,
yeah. Well, hey, Mike, thanks, man. I always love talking to you, and I love the insight that you have for everything about managing teams, about company workflow, about the relationships. I jump to communication, and you jump to relationships, and I think that's what I appreciate about you is just that knowledge and just kind of the insight that you have for maybe what could help that. So thank you. I appreciate you taking time for both of us and for Caliber doing this.